Hi there and welcome.
You're listening to Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm.
My name is Avantika, and I'm a researcher exploring animal consciousness, environmental sustainability, and planetary health. I want to help bring animal perspectives to the table and transform our relationship with the natural world.
And I'm Barbara. I'm an animal communicator and retired veterinarian. My true passion is exploring the hearts and souls of animals and helping people come to a much deeper understanding of who the animals truly are at their core.
This podcast is for anyone who loves animals and nature and has an interest in their own personal and spiritual development. We'll bring you powerful conversations with fascinating people about animal and nature sentience, consciousness, and communication.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of love, respect, understanding, and care for the fellow beings who share our beautiful Mother Earth with us.
Hello and welcome everyone to a special episode of Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm. Some of you may know that Barbara and I recently took a trip to Vancouver, which is in Western Canada, to go see Dr. Jane Goodall. We want to tell you all about that event today and also share our highlights and key takeaways with you because Barbara and I both felt amazing. We felt inspired. We felt motivated. And we really want to take this opportunity to share all that with you. So, Barbara, can you tell everyone a little bit about where we went, why we went, and what the event was like?
Yeah, it was a whole trip for me. I had to fly from Oregon to Seattle to Vancouver, and Avantika and I stayed in this really sweet Airbnb. And we went to the event. It was at 7 o'clock Friday night, and I was shocked by so many people. I mean, I come from a small little place, a little town, and I'm not used to enormous crowds. But I was able to talk with someone who worked there, and she said this was the largest crowd she's seen since she's worked there. There were almost 2,700 people, and not an empty seat in the house, which is very unusual. I was just shocked. And it was so exciting to me that that many people love Jane and love animals. That's what I got from it. And it was just a very sweet evening with Jane. Yeah.
I was just going to add that we didn't mention that we were there. It was her 90th birthday celebration. That was like, the whole one of the motivations for the event was to celebrate her 90th birthday. And actually, Barbara, before we even move forward, maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about, for those who may not know about Dr. Goodall's work, maybe a little bit about the impact she's had and why her work and her research has been so important.
Okay, so Jane Goodall, how many years ago was that? It was like, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago. She was selected by Dr. Louis Leakey. And Avantika will talk a little bit about her history here, I think, but Dr. Louis Leakey was an anthropologist in Africa, a very well-known anthropologist, and he decided that he wanted to study the great apes because they're humans' closest relatives. And he must have been an extraordinary visionary because he selected Jane, who was she'd never had any biological training. She didn't have any qualifications whatsoever. But she was completely passionate about Africa and the animals in Africa and had done a lot of her own research on that. And he selected her to study chimpanzees. He selected Diane Fossey to study the mountain gorillas. And he selected Baruti Galdikas to study the orangutans in Borneo and Sumatra. And all of those women just lasted for years and years doing their research. what's so incredible about Jane Goodall is that she went against mainstream science and she gave names to all the chimps that she studied, which was a big no-no in the scientific community. And she was really ostracized for a long time for doing that. And yet she did it anyway. And she just completely changed the whole way that animals are studied in the wild. It's become a whole different scenario, this anthropomorphism that so many people are afraid of, which means attributing human characteristics to animals. And that was a huge taboo in the scientific community. But she showed that animals have emotions. The big finding initially that she was known for was proving that animals can use tools. Previous to that time, the scientists thought that only humans could use tools, and she showed chimpanzees cleaning off sticks, getting the leaves off sticks, and sticking them in a termite mound to pull out the termites. Nobody had seen that before, and they didn't even believe her until she she was sent a photographer through National Geographic, and his name was uh, Hugo van Leeuwenhoek, and he recorded it through his camera, through video, what the chimps were doing and proved that this was true. Later, they ended up marrying and they had a son who they call Grub. He had another name, which I don't remember, but they later divorced. But anyway, that's her history. And she lived in the boonies for so many years on her own. And it was not easy, I will say. It was many months before she even saw a chimpanzee that she could relate to. That's a whole nother story. So she was persistent. She was just really focused and incredible. So she's really impacted many, many, many people around the world in that way.
Yeah, and Barbara, when we were first contemplating going to this event and we heard about it, I remember you telling me how much of an impact she's had on your life growing
Yeah.
up. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I wrote an article for my local paper. I was living in this little town in the mountains in Colorado, Redstone, and I wrote an article for the local paper because, well, the first encounter I had with her was when I was doing my veterinary residency in non-domestic animal medicine at UC Davis in California. And she spoke, and I went to hear her speak. And I was so excited because I'd always wanted to go to Africa and I'd always wanted to see the chimps and wanted to meet her. And I went up to her, waited in line, and was able to talk to her at the end of the talk. And I said, I'm a veterinarian and I'm working with primates in this primate center at Davis, and I'm all excited about learning about monkeys and apes. And I thought she'd say, oh, that's wonderful. Why don't you come and see the chimpanzees? Instead, she said, you know, veterinarians can be some of the worst advocates for, they're not advocates, worst um, people working with the animals because they work in these environments like these primate research centers where the animals are treated terribly and they don't speak up. They just go along with what's happening. And I was shocked. I was really shocked and disappointed because I devoted my whole career to learning about these animals and I just wanted to help in any way I could. It was devastating. So fortunately, I was able to go back again. The next night she was speaking, I believe it was just for a select group of people. I was involved as the zoo veterinarian at that time, so I was able to go. And again, she spoke, and again, I waited in line and I said, you know, not all veterinarians are bad. And she said, I'm sorry, maybe I was a little over the top. But you know what? That really influenced me in a huge way because, God, it's going to get me emotional. Till that time, I just did what I needed to do to learn what I thought I needed to learn. And I realized that I had been really suppressing my emotions by working in these places where the animals were in small cages and treated miserably. And I went along with it just because I thought I had to. And it really deeply changed something in me, that experience. And so many years later, when I was living in Colorado, and I wasn't too far from Aspen, Colorado, and there's a big institute there, an educational institution, and Jane Goodall was a speaker. And I signed up as a volunteer to be a liaison for someone, and it turned out I was the liaison for Jane. So I was with her for 2 or 3 days, just following her around and got to see who she is and how she works. And what I learned is that she's up very, very early every morning, maybe around 5 in the morning, and she's working. And she's traveling 300 days a year, which she's still doing at 90. And she was so completely dedicated to the animals that it was just astounding to me, all she had accomplished. And it really, that again, just really impacted me and inspired me to do all I could for the animals in some way. Of course, I felt like there was no way I could match her, but it was very inspiring to meet her. So when I heard that this was her 90th birthday, it's like, okay, I'm going. And Avantika stepped up and she's going, and we just had a wonderful time together.
Yeah, it was such a powerful and inspirational evening. I hope I always keep it in my heart and remember how I felt when I was there. Yeah, and I think it was really nice sitting there looking around, thinking that the whole audience was filled with people who we probably have a lot in common with, similar values, similar beliefs, similar vision for the future and hopes and dreams and desires. So I really wish we could have mingled with them and interacted more with them. It would have been so fun to get to know everybody there. But that was definitely, I could just feel it. There was this energy in the audience and this energy of excitement and hope and just so much enthusiasm for being there together.
Yeah, it was wonderful, wasn't it? Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to talk a little bit about my history with Jane because she's been an enormous influence in my life for many, many years. When I was very young in Cincinnati, Ohio, where I grew up, she came and spoke. I don't have any idea how old I was, probably a young teenager, I don't know. And I was impressed back then. And, I will say that at 90 years old, she's still a dynamic speaker, and she didn't slow down for 2 hours. I mean, she just talked for 2 hours, and you would never know how old she is. For me, that's inspirational because as I'm getting older and people think there's this age thing where people slow down and they're not as qualified and not as articulate as they age, she proved all that untrue. So that was exciting.
Barbara, do you think because you'd heard her speak before, so this may have been like the third time or fourth time, was there anything she shared anything new you heard or different you heard that stuck with you or that you wanted to share with our audience that was important?
I think I knew a lot of her history already. I've read about her and listened to things and watched things about her. So I knew a lot of her personal history. I think what was kind of different for me this time was she talked a lot about her work through the Jane Goodall Institute, what they've been doing around the world. She talked about Roots and Shoots, which is their program for children. And that's all over the world and has impacted so many children. They have children that do different projects related to environmental sustainability and wildlife conservation and animal welfare. It's just impacted so many young people. And the work she's done to rescue chimpanzees and influence institutions like that study chimpanzees for research. She's helped to enlighten those places and end some of that suffering. So I think that's what impacted me the most this time. What impacted you, Avantika?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I have, after the event, I think it took me some time to like process and digest everything that I heard. But I think there were three main things that really stood out to me. So the first thing was that I noticed that all her work now and what she was talking about wasn't just about the animals in isolation, just that her work focuses on animals. She talked a lot about how caring for people, the environment, and animals needs to all happen hand in hand. And if we think about some of the unfortunate things that are happening around the world with animals, that some of those things are happening because people are in desperate and dire situations and they need to feed themselves. Or if we think about the environment, things that are happening around the world, that these people, sometimes these are their livelihoods that are at risk and they depend on these things, which to us, we have judgment against those things. So she talked about how in her Roots and Shoots program, the children who are coming up with ideas and proposals for programs, how they have to be focusing on all three things, or that they have to be partnering with other programs that are focusing on all three things, which I thought was really important and so very true, because we can't solve one problem with, while ignoring the others. They all need to be working harmoniously. So that really resonated with me because some of the work that I do right now is related to ESG, which is environmental social governance. And we talk about this kind of holistic systemic approach that all of these things need to be focused on in order for us to really create the world that we want to. Um, the issues that are happening with animals out there are related to the issues with people, that are related to the issues that the environments they live in, and they are all interconnected. And she talked about that she learned very early on in her career that we are truly all interconnected. So the importance of seeing that and acknowledging that when we are trying to find solutions is very important. So that was one thing. The other thing that I loved hearing about, and Barbara, you know a lot more about Jane. I learned a lot about her at this event, but I kind of went in not even knowing all that much about her life story and her how this all happened for her. So hearing that story was incredible. And for those of you who don't know, I'll tell you in basically a quick nutshell. When she was a very young girl, she had a dream to go to Africa, to live with the wild animals, and to write books about them. That's what she had in her mind and in her heart. And as she grew up and went to school and went to high school and shared that dream with people, they would just, tell her like, why don't you do something that's more realistic for a young girl? And this must have been, I don't know in what decade, but at that time, nobody was even talking about anything like that. And she said she grew up during World War II as well. So this was a very far-fetched dream.
Can
But
I
she
add
still,
something
yeah,
here,
please.
Avantika? One thing she talked about a lot was her mother
Yeah,
and how supportive her mother was throughout her life. And you can take it from there. I mean, her mother ended up in Africa with her, but that was the one thing that she kept emphasizing was so critically important for her was to have her mother's support. And I thought of so many children who, if their parents could support them in that way, what a huge blessing that is.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say that next, that when nobody else believed in her dreams, her mom did. And her mom told her two things, that if you can make anything you want happen, you have to work hard and you have to say yes to opportunities. I remember her saying that. So that was the big message she got from her mom over and over again. So, as she got older and got out of school, she didn't necessarily have the resources. She didn't necessarily have the resources to go to school and study the things that she may have wanted to study. But she ended up working hard and doing other things so that she could, earn a living and work, still keeping in mind and still holding that vision that she would one day end up in Africa living with the animals, spending time with them, observing them, and not having any idea how that would happen. But sure enough, one random thing happened, which led to another random thing. And a random meaning like unpredictable, couldn't have ever seen it coming, could not have made it happen if she tried. It happened like at the right time, in the right way. She had to work really hard to say yes to those opportunities and to make them happen, but they showed up. And one thing led to another thing, which led to another thing. And all that hard work that she had done over the years and all the effort she put in, maybe not knowing that, not necessarily for this dream, but all that she had learned and done and the work ethic that she had probably developed and the interest and the passion she had developed, one day then, all came to fruition and was very important. So her story, just hearing the details of how this happened, and she explained it so well, was so inspiring that I think it's important that we all hold on to our dreams, our visions, as simple as they may be, as far-fetched as they may be. And it sounded to me like she really left it up to fate or to the universe, or, she didn't try to figure out the how because that was impossible at that time. But she still held it so strong in her heart, that vision, that and believed that it would happen one day, and it did happen. So, it's just going to be a reminder for me moving forward that sometimes more important than figuring out what the next steps are in life, it's maybe more important to spend time thinking about what I really want and just holding on to that day after day after day, and trusting that if it's the right thing for me, if it's in my highest good, if it's in the highest good for the planet, for everyone, that the steps will show up on their own. And I imagine it was not easy for her. I imagine there were many obstacles and many challenges along the way, but just hearing about how this dream started and where she ended up is pretty mind-blowing. And like Barbara mentioned, she did a PhD in this work without having a bachelor's degree or a master's degree, which I don't know if anyone, and this is not like an honorary doctorate. This is like she got her PhD. She did her PhD degree. So in a world where some things may seem impossible, she I think proved probably over and over again in many ways that that nothing's impossible. And if it's the right thing for you, and if it needs to happen, if it's important for the well-being of, for the greater good, that it will happen. And the last thing that I want to talk about that stuck in my head, and I'm surprised that I even remembered the details, but it was just so important to me, was near the end, she talked about hope. And if you know Dr. Goodall's message and the work that she does, she talks a lot about hope and how important it is in today's day and age with the kind of world that we live in and the kinds of challenges that we have to always maintain hope. That things are not over yet. There's still a lot of work to be done. We still all need to work together. We all need to contribute, and that there is hope. And she talked about 4 reasons for having hope, which I thought were beautiful. Her first reason was children and the next generation, and that there are kids now who are growing up who want to do things differently, who want to see a better future, who understand what these problems are that we have in the world, and they're eager and motivated to to work on those things. So, there's a lot to look forward to with the next generation and the ideas and the willpower that they're going to have to solve some of our big problems. The second thing she talked about was Mother Nature and how amazing she is at healing herself. That when we give her a chance, when we give nature a chance to heal, it does. And how powerful that can be, when we think about the environments and habitats that have been destroyed, they can come back, they can thrive again if we do the right things and put the right effort in to help them come back. She also talked about human intellect. And she talked about how we have such amazing intellect as human beings, and that it's important to think about how we use that intellect. Are we going to use that? We've used in so many cases that ability and that very unique some very unique qualities that humans have, our intellectual capacities to do pretty bad things and to do things that have harmed the environment, that have harmed each other. But if we use that intellect in the right ways, we can do some incredible things. And there are incredible things going on out there. There are people doing amazing work. And so more of us need to use our intellect in the right ways. And the last thing she talked about was the human spirit and how she has seen people in such unfortunate and dire circumstances, or what we would think and judge as being dire and unfortunate circumstances, who keep going, who keep living, who are living life and making the most of it, because the human spirit is so strong and powerful. It can be. We can get through so many hardships in life and keep going and keep going. And the human spirit can be so resilient. So those were the four things she talked about. And I just remember hearing each one and being like, yeah, she's so right. I agree 100%. And it's so, so important. We're bombarded right now from every direction with bad news and things that are happening every day that are heartbreaking, depressing, disappointing. But it's so important to look beyond that and visualize a world where things are better and know that there is hope. We just need to get our act together, and we need to keep working really hard at these things and supporting other people who are working hard at these things. So those were my big takeaways. There was a lot in between as well that I will always hold close to me, but these were some main things that I left feeling like they were my big highlights from the event that I was so, so grateful to be there for.
That's amazing that you could remember all that stuff. Those 4 reasons for hope, my God, that's great. And, she wrote a book called A Reason for Hope,
Mhm.
where she's talked about, and I've heard her talk about how, one person can take an endangered species that's almost the last one. The others have gone extinct, and they've brought them back to life, saved a whole species. She's got lots of examples of that as part of her reason for hope. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is, just as we're talking, is when I was with her at the Aspen Institute, the only thing I remember clearly that she said was, someone asked her, "Jane, how do you lived in the forest with these chimpanzees for so many years. How do you do all this travel and go into these horrible institutions where chimpanzees are kept in horrendous conditions, and how do you do it without falling apart?" And what she said is, "I take the forest with me." That memory of being in the forest and the tranquility and the beauty of the forest. And she said that's what sustains her. So that was so beautiful. And
Mhm.
the other thing that I'm thinking about that she said a lot is that every single person can make a difference. That's one of the main themes that she has, and she wants to teach the children, is that even an act that seems so small can still make a difference, and she really stressed that point.
Mhm. Yeah, I honestly, I was sitting there thinking, man, everybody needs to hear her talk, at some point in their life. And I'm so glad we were able to take the opportunity and go listen to her. But I hope, uh, I hope more people do, because I think we need reminders of that.
Yeah. She's incredible. She's well known and loved around the world. Just one person, and she's made such an enormous impact for
Hmm.
people, for animals, for the environment. It's just pretty astounding. She's quite incredible.
Yeah, and I loved, that her personality is just so warm. Like I was so surprised by how funny she was. She was hilarious.
She
She
is
had
funny.
our audience laughing throughout the entire time. I mean, she was talking about such emotional and such emotional things, but she had this sense of humor that carried through from beginning to end. And I loved that about her. Even though I didn't know her personally, it really felt like she was speaking to each and every person in the audience personally, And the first thing she did when she came on stage was she asked the production people to turn the house lights on. She wanted to see who was in the audience. I thought that was so nice. And that's what it was like. There was 2,700 people there, yet you felt like you were sitting, it was like a fireside chat, and it was just her and a few people. And she had that effect with her voice and what she shared and how she shared it. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, it really was. And there was a nice little piece toward the end where she sat on a sofa with another woman, Jan, who people loved in Vancouver. They all knew her, and they just had a chat, and this woman was really funny, and Jane was really funny, and it was just very sweet, very sweet.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you all enjoyed listening to our little, that event in a nutshell, what it was like for us. And hopefully, we took you on a little journey with us, going back in time a few days ago when we were sitting there. It was important for Barbara and I to share that with all of you because it was such a profound experience for us. Barbara, is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
No, it was just such a joy to be there with you, Avantika.
Yeah.
Avantika and I have been doing this almost 2 years now. We've known each other, we figured, for like 4 years, and
Mhm.
we've only met in person twice. The first time was in Africa, in Botswana, and this was the second time, and we had fun.
Yeah,
We had
it was
fun.
fun just hanging out.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah,
fun. Yeah.
yeah, and I would just like to say that, reiterating Jane's message, every single person is important and can make a difference. And we all need to just remember that when we feel lost or like we're not doing enough, which I often do, just remember whatever we do is enough and it's good and it's helpful.
Hmm. Absolutely. And if anyone who's listening, if this is the first time you're hearing about Dr. Goodall's work or you're not that familiar with it, we highly encourage you to check out what she's doing. I'll share a link in the notes so you can see a little bit more about what her institute is up to. But highly recommend, even just going on YouTube and listening to some of her speeches that are out there. She is amazing. She's inspirational. What she has to share is really profound.
There's also a movie that came out a few years ago. I think it was just called Jane. It might have been an IMAX movie, I'm not sure, but it was really good about her and her life.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us for this short episode, this short special episode we wanted to share with you. And before we go, we would like to end with a blessing for the animals.
We'd like to end this podcast by taking just a moment to be quiet. And we give thanks and blessings to these amazing animals that we share our lives with. They give us so much and ask for so little in return. We hope that you can keep the animals and all living beings in your heart and in your mind as you go about your day. Thank you so much for being here with us today.